before the bombings in Africa. Your effort came because you were looking into what had happened at the bombing of the World Trade Center.
An extension of the World Trade Center case, but really I was covering the federal investigation into Bin Laden out of New York, which is where I have to disagree with my venerable colleague, Mr. Barry, because the U.S. government was going to great lengths to keep Bin Laden's name secret, to keep that investigation secret, and not to promote it in any way. I also think that the sales job on Bin Laden, if you will, was certainly done among Islamic fundamentalists and among his people and followers well before he became any kind of a household name. His American exposure has helped fuel that somewhat.
So we haven't created a monster in your judgment. He was a monster in a sense of...
I would agree with that, and I would also agree that he's still in Afghanistan.
How did you get to see him?
As any major organization, he has a mechanism for this. He had a front office operation in London, which consisted of a public relations wing, and we were vetted by them and questioned by them. Then we were sent to Islamabad, which was pretty much the neutral site where his operatives met with us. And then they literally carried us on sealed orders, if you will. We never knew where we were going, although we knew it would eventually be Afghanistan. Carried us through, without our ability to communicate with anyone, to Bin Laden's camps.
Carried you through on what?
Vans, buses, airplanes, many-legged journey. Very much the technique, ironically, that the U.S. government would use to put someone into the witness protection program. You don't go from point A to point B, because that's traceable. So we went from Islamabad to Peshawar, where we stayed for a while, and then on to a place called Banu, and then through carts and buses and vans to a safe house where we were kept for a day, and then on to Afghanistan, where we were actually put on ice for a couple of days before being moved to another camp to see Bin Laden. So they went to great lengths searching us, taking apart our gear, looking for homing devices, GPS, transmitters, anything to indicate we either weren't who we said we were, or that even if we were who we said we were, that we could do nothing to transmit his location.
That you had somehow been compromised.
Right.
And so after you had satisfied them, how did you come face to face with Bin Laden?
We were taken on a 3-hour drive from one of his 3 camps to another one, after which he was produced. They had a little mix-up on the way. One of their checkpoints opened fire on our cars due to a slip-up in communications. It turned out all to be warning shots, which was a great relief. And then when Bin Laden arrived, there was a lot of gunfire and fireworks, and I was told by the fellow who, for lack of a better word, is his PR man, Ayman Zawahiri from the Egyptian Jihad Group, which now operates under him, that there was always a great celebration when he comes, although I think we clearly understood that was for our benefit, and then sat down and had a very interesting one-way conversation with him.
You listened?
Well, I asked the questions, which we were required to give in advance. We were told, because their translator later needed to rewrite them into Arabic and then read them from his translation. But we were told that there was very good news. Mr. Bin Laden would answer all of our questions. And then he said, and there's more news. We will not translate the answers. And I said, as you would, well, how will we have follow-up questions? And he said, there will be no problem. There will be no follow-up questions. So that's what I mean by a one-way interview.
Yeah.
I didn't actually realize what the answers to my questions were until I got back fully.
So what did he say?
He centered in on his 3 essential goals. The U.S. military out of Saudi Arabia, his first and foremost goal, because in his view, and in the view of that religion, it is the most sacred holy land in Islam. The U.S. attacks on Iraq had to end, his second point, although he was interesting about Saddam Hussein, not supporting him or attacking him, but focusing on an end to the attack on Iraq, citing the women and children. And then thirdly, Jerusalem, or the Palestinians, an issue that is not new and needs little introduction. And those were his essential 3 demands. He also said 2 interesting things. One, that the American soldiers would come home in coffins and boxes when they came home if the U.S. refused to leave Saudi Arabia. and that the mothers of American children and mothers of Americans in general should be concerned if their government didn't do that. And secondly, he did something he hadn't really done before, which is he made his threats but put a time cap on them. He said the results of these threats or my fatwa will be seen within the next several weeks, which was unusual. That was May 28th. We aired it June 10th. The embassy bombings were August 17th. The U.S. government says that people in that very camp had been commissioned by bin Laden in the actual planning and execution of the embassy bombings as early as March, according to at least what they've put out in the public documents. It means when he was making those threats, if you believe the government documents in this court case, that he already knew what he was going to blow up and when and what the likely consequences were.
In May of 1998, ABC News correspondent John Miller went to Afghanistan to conduct an interview with bin Laden. Bin Laden's appearance was cause for celebration for his men.
All hell breaks loose. Missiles are shot up in the air, tracer bullets, and then when he walks into the room and you realize this guy is 6'3" or 6'4", he never raises his voice. He doesn't pound the table or use his fist. He's not a fiery orator. He's soft-spoken. But the words he was using were extremely powerful and frightening. He had three principal issues: to remove the U.S. military presence from Saudi Arabia. The other was to end the U.S. support of Israel, particularly as it affected negatively the Palestinians. And three was, at that time, an immediate halt to the bombing of Iraq, and even still now today, an end to sanctions that he felt adversely affected Iraqi women and children and innocents.
Miller questioned bin Laden about the disturbing fatwa targeting American civilians. Bin Laden fired back.
American history does not distinguish between civilians and military, not even women and children. They're the ones who used the bombs against Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The fatwa applies to all those who assist and support in killing the sons of Muslims.
I would be very careful about an assessment ruling out an attack on U.S. soil or saying it's unlikely. I would be very careful about an assessment ruling out an attack on U.S. soil or saying it's unlikely. As Peter pointed out, this is about the hardening of targets. So you have a progression here. First, he made his threats. He already had a track record of allegedly being connected to attacks on the U.S. military in Saudi Arabia. Then they hardened those targets. Then they hardened the rest of the Middle East targets, diplomatic and military. What did he do? He went to the softer targets, which were in East Africa, non-agenda countries from his issues at least, but they were the soft targets, and he took extreme advantage of that, very successfully from his standpoint. Now they've hardened the embassy targets around the world, and this portends dangerous things. If, in fact, he is trying to mount another attack, and all the intelligence senior analysts have said publicly before Congress and on television that they believe he is, then you go again to the softer targets. And when you run out of military installations and embassies, then you end up moving towards American symbols, corporate symbols, or tourism, or America stateside. And that's the terribly frightening element that they're grappling with now. Then you go again to the softer targets. And when you run out of military installations and embassies, then you end up moving towards American symbols, corporate symbols, or tourism, or America stateside. And that's the terribly frightening element that they're grappling with now.
1998, 3 years before 9/11, former ABC News reporter and current member of the FBI, John Miller, sat down with bin Laden in Afghanistan for a very rare interview.
Osama bin Laden is well hidden and heavily guarded by his own cadre of trained Muslim fighters. Moving between a series of camps in the Afghan mountains, he has issued a series of fatwas, religious decrees signed by Muslim clerics that call for military jihad, holy war, against the United States.
We believe that the biggest thieves in the world are Americans, and the biggest terrorists on earth are the Americans. The only way for us to fend off these assaults is by using similar means. We do not differentiate between those dressed in military uniforms and civilians. They're all targets in this fatwa.
Bin Laden made his latest threat for Bin Laden, $5 million for his military commander, Mohammed Atif, who we met that night in the camp. That's $10 million worth of fugitives the last time we sat down in the tent. But I also don't think the people who are going to have the access to him ideologically aren't going to be swayed by money. I think you put those rewards out there as a tool. I actually believe that if Bin Laden is captured, it's going to be the slow fix, not the quick fix, meaning either many months or probably years of trying to squeeze him out of one country, in all likelihood Afghanistan, into another country where we can move swiftly and quietly to try and intercept him, or where the U.S. government will do that.
In the same way they caught the Kurdish terrorists?
It's actually the only way they've had success in those kinds of high-level captures, taking a long time and taking their opportunities when they saw them. Right now, I don't think those opportunities are there. Agreeing with a lot of what was just said, much less geopolitical answer. At the end of the day, I think he wants to be a martyr. I think that's why he's continued to turn up the heat and not disappear or burrow under. That's why I think he's continued to make public statements, even televised statements. I think that that he wants to keep turning up the heat until the U.S. either comes and gets him or kills him, because I truly believe, based on his personality and mindset, he would like to die for the cause. When he walks into the room and you realize this guy is 6'3" or 6'4", he never raises his voice. He doesn't pound the table or use his fist. He's not a fiery orator. He's soft-spoken. But the words he was using were extremely powerful and frightening. He had three principal issues. Rumors, persistent rumors lately, that he may be ill. One of the rumors was throat cancer. It is a lot less expensive to be a martyr when you only have a very limited amount of time to live. But I'm not sure it would make any difference. I think that that is his goal, and I think he's going to keep pushing, which is to say I don't think we've heard the last of Osama Bin Laden. It may be easy to make such threats. A man on a hilltop backed by a few hundred mujahideen soldiers declaring war on the United States. But it's not a conventional war that he's threatening. Bin Laden is talking about terrorism. To find Bin Laden, we had to travel to Pakistan, where eventually Bin Laden's people made contact. We moved north through dusty towns to the Afghan border. Just before sunset, Bin Laden's people led us on foot through the mountains, and we crossed unseen into Afghanistan. 2 days later, at 1 in the morning, we met with Bin Laden. Clearly, for our benefit, there was a little show of gunfire by his men to greet him. Vince Canestraro is a former CIA official and an ABC News consultant on terrorism and security matters.
Clearly, he is a role model for a lot of Islamic militants in the world today. I mean, his personal story is so compelling to them.
Bin Laden left his home in Saudi Arabia at the age of 19 to join the Muslims fighting the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Like many of the young fighters, he was religious and committed. Unlike any other, he came from a Saudi family that ran a construction empire worth $5 billion. Bin Laden's personal worth is estimated at $200 million.
Yet he sacrifices all of that to take up what he believes is a religious duty, an obligation to expel the atheistic invaders of a Muslim country.
We must use punishment to keep your evil away from Muslims, Muslim women and children.
To understand Bin Laden's hatred for America, you have to put the U.S. in the context it is seen by many Muslims.
Americans impose themselves on everyone who believes in his religion and his rights. They accuse our children in Palestine of being terrorists, those children who have no weapons and have not yet even reached maturity.
We asked Bin Laden about Somalia. The United States referred to the military operation in Somalia as a rescue mission to prevent genocide by warring tribes. But Bin Laden simply viewed it as another invasion of an Islamic country. American intelligence agencies believe it was Bin Laden who dispatched his personal brigades with rocket launchers to shoot down U.S. helicopters. 18 U.S. soldiers were killed. Bin Laden does not deny he had a role and revels in America's retreat from Somalia.
We realize